Okay, hello my friends, my name is Darren Gerdes. Here are the four big stories for today. I'm sorry to get this out so late. We had a family emergency, and then between meetings and class and other things, it's just one thing after another. Okay, so I'm going to start with this. This is the British Defense Intelligence update. According to local officials, voting in the 15 to 17 March 2024 Russian presidential elections has started early across the temporarily Russian-controlled territories of Ukraine. Now, Putin wants to have more people vote for him and vote by a higher percentage because he thinks like that makes him look extra good, where it actually makes him look more fraudulent, but he doesn't seem to understand that. Efforts by Russian officials to get the population to vote are intensifying. In Luhansk, 2,600 officials have been drafted in to visit homes and persuade residents to vote. Heads of educational and other government establishments have been told to ensure their subordinates turn out to vote, with no independent election observers and voter lists in at least one town absent. The potential for falsification of results is increased. With significant population displacement and migration from these areas due to the ongoing conflict, it's likely that only approximately a third of pre-war population remains. But Russia's going to try to hold a vote and show how awesome and dreamy Putin is by winning the election by such a wide margin there, and we all know it's going to be fraudulent. The Kharkiv Human Rights Organization put this out. Russians with machine guns ensure occupied Ukraine votes for Putin. So few will fail to vote for Putin when there's a fighter with a machine gun accompanying the ballot box. Machine guns are the most effective form of election campaigning, but the occupiers appear to also be bussing in voters from the Russian Federation and registering total strangers in the homes of people forced to flee after the Russian invasion because they want to have the numbers very high. I asked what will happen if I didn't vote. The member of the commission looked at me and said, as if I was mad, and asked, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Then they turned and looked at the men with the machine guns. Of course, everything became clear. Now, the article goes on a little bit later to talk about like even registering people in their homes or at their addresses. Like maybe that's a way of actually giving their homes away to somebody else or something along those lines. It's all bad. Okay, that's big story number one. Big story number two, Putin reiterates a nuclear threat as Ukraine launches drone strikes on Russian oil refineries. So yesterday and the day before, it was something with the drone strikes from Ukraine into Russian territory. Russian authorities reported another major attack by Ukrainian drones a day after the Ukrainian attack, damaging Lukoil's Norilsk refinery in Russian territory. The Russian Defense Ministry said air defenses downed 58 drones over 6 regions. I talked about that this morning. Operations at another oil refinery in Russia's southern Rostov region were stopped on Wednesday after downed drones fell on its territory. Russia this week has faced some of the most significant attacks on its territory since Moscow sent troops into Ukraine more than 2 years ago. This has been like the most amazing, I mean, other than hitting the Kerch Bridge or hitting a ship in the Black Sea, like the Moskva. This has been pretty much one of the biggest days since the war began. In an interview with Russian state television on Wednesday, President Putin said Ukraine was upping its attacks on Russian territory in order to interfere with the presidential elections later this week. Like anybody thinks you're not going to get elected, right? It's simple. This is all happening against the backdrop of the failures on the front line. They did not achieve any of the goals that they set for themselves this year. And then the article goes on to talk about how he's ready to use nuclear weapons. Putin said on Wednesday, he warned that Russia is ready to use nuclear weapons if its sovereignty or independence is threatened, issuing another blunt warning to the West. The Russian leader has repeatedly talked about his readiness to use nuclear weapons since invading Ukraine in February of 2022. The latest threat came just days before the March 15 to 17th Russian presidential election, in which Putin is all but certain to win another 6-year term. Our triad, the nuclear triad, is more modern than any other triad. Only we and the Americans actually have such triads, and we have advanced much more here, Putin said in a wide-ranging interview. We are ready to use weapons, including any weapons, including the weapons you mentioned, if it is questioned the existence of the Russian state or damage to our sovereignty and independence, said Putin. And I started thinking about this, and I thought, you know, if Russia didn't have nuclear weapons, they would have been smashed by now. They're using those nuclear weapons as deterrents, and they've deterred the West. But if they didn't have those weapons, they would have been like some TikTok fight brawl, drunken brawl scene that you'd see on TikTok, where one person gets into a fight and then it just turns into mayhem. The countries around Ukraine would have swarmed in and crushed Russia by now. But they're effectively deterring the West with those nuclear weapons. Okay, big story number 3. House Democrats and centrist Republicans launched separate efforts to force a vote on Ukraine aid. This went wrong. It went sideways in a hurry, and it's because, well, okay, let's look at this. House Democrats and a small group of centrist Republicans on Tuesday launched a separate long-shot efforts to force vote of tens of billions of dollars in wartime aid in Ukraine, intensifying pressure on Speaker Mike Johnson to take up the foreign funding package. But will it intensify the pressure, or will it backfire? Democrats, as the minority in the House, began gathering signatures to force a floor vote on the Senate's $95 billion package of aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan through a discharge petition. Shortly after, a group of Republicans launched their own signature drive for a proposal that would trim the package to $66 billion, mostly for military aid, including some border security provisions. Okay, another article about that gives us some more context. And I think what's actually going to happen here is it's going to strengthen Mike Johnson's hand. It's going to backfire. It's not going to work like it is, because the Democrats and the Republicans still can't agree on which petition they're willing to sign. So, why it matters. The fracturing of these efforts could make it more difficult to bypass House Speaker Mike Johnson's refusal to put any bill with Ukraine funding up for a vote. So, Republicans likely won't sign on to the Democrat leadership's discharge petition, and some Democrats say Brian Fitzpatrick's petition is a non-starter. So Republicans, now think about this, if you're a Republican, signing on to the Democrat petition means you're going to be persona non grata to the Republican leadership moving forward. But if it was a Republican petition, then okay, at least it was other Republicans that were up, for this thing, and it's not necessarily as bad or seen as bad. But then the Democrats have a problem with the Republican version, and they're not willing to sign that one. And yeah, it's just bad all the way around. But I'm not excusing Republicans, but wow. House Democrats' discharge petition for the Senate's bipartisan $95 billion foreign aid bill went live on Tuesday. So did the petition led by Fitzpatrick. This is the one that we've been talking about, the co-chair of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, who wants a vote on his bipartisan House bill. A discharge petition needs 218 signatures in order to bypass the House Republican leadership. Democrats' discharge petition obtained 169 signatures, all from Democrats. Okay? Fitzpatrick's petition so far, he launched it later, only had 12 signatures, 6 Republicans, 6 from Democrats. Both petitions are likely to struggle to get the necessary signatures to force a vote, because the Republicans don't like the Democrat one, the Democrats don't like the Republican one. Other Democrats have said that they will go for the Senate bill, but not for Fitzpatrick's bill. For us, it's a non-starter. There's stuff in the bill, quite frankly, we can't accept, Representative Jim McGovern of Massachusetts told Axios. Fitzpatrick's decision to even file a discharge petition represents a new phase of Republican frustrations with their rocky congressional majority. And they're only a majority by like 4 votes. And so, yeah, it's not looking good. If you want a good overview, by the way, of this, surprisingly, it was Johnny Pierce at ATP Geopolitics who did a great job. The only thing that he got wrong in his assessment, and I did my doctorate on the Constitution, the only thing he got wrong was the number of members in the House. That's the only thing. Everything else he got pretty well, but I couldn't tell you how many members are in the British House of Commons or the British House of Lords in the total there. So good job, Johnny. All right, next. Biden and Trump, both yesterday was another primary day, and both Biden and Trump clinched the nomination. And for Trump, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion last week. Nikki Haley dropped out. You need 1,215 delegates. Trump now has 1,249 delegates. He is the presumptive nominee. He'll go to the convention and be nominated, and it's essentially done. But what's troubling is the Trumpification of the Republican Party, where there's now Laura Trump is now in charge of the RNC, the Republican National Committee, and that's all bad. And there's this like Trumpublicanism-ishness of what's going on here. It's a really they're getting rid of, they're cleaning house. So Donald Trump's newly installed leadership team at the Republican National Committee on Monday began the process of pushing out dozens of officials, according to two people close to the Trump campaign and the RNC. All told, the expectation is that more than 60 RNC staffers who work across the political, communications, and data departments will be let go. My guess is it'll be Republicans like me, I don't work for the RNC, but people that are of my persuasion of Republican, old guard, Reagan Republicans will be those that will be pushed out. They said in other places that it was for budgetary reasons. I'm not sure that that's the whole story. I think it's ideological reasons as much as anything else. By the way, I had a horrifying thought today, and I'm reluctant to even say it. But if Trump doesn't win in November, I think we'll see Trump for the next 4 years campaigning for the next 4 years. What I mean by that is Trump is 78, 79, 80, 80 or so 77, 70, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81. He'll be the same age in 4 years as Biden is right now. And he'll say, I'm not too old to run. Biden just ran at 81, and we're going to see Trump not for 4 years starting in November, but after 4 years later, we may see Trump again. I see no signs that he's planning to go anywhere. And so this Trumpification of the Republican National Committee is, I think, a really ominous sign for my party. And I say that saying this. Some of you say, well, why are you still a Republican? I want to see my party reformed. That's why I'm still a Republican. There's nowhere for me to go. The Democrats wouldn't have me for many reasons. I want to see this reform. At any rate, that's my 4 big stories for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and the coffees. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.